What's going on, guys, and welcome back to part 7 of my journey to Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore, which is officially 1 month away. It is now March 15th as I am recording this video, and the film releases on April 15th. We're in the home stretch, we've only got 4 movies to go, and today I'm going to be talking about Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, the penultimate film in the Harry Potter series, which is technically the finale, but only part 1 of the finale. This is, in my opinion, the most frustrating Harry Potter film, but there are some things that I like about it, so let's talk about those. Right off the bat, I love the entire opening scene as the trio prepares for the journey that is to come. Hermione obliviating her parents is extremely heartbreaking, but does set the tone well for the rest of the film, and there are a lot of moments that bring the series full circle in a nice way. One that I completely forgot about before this viewing is when Harry goes into the cupboard under the stairs, his old room, and takes a look around it for the last time. It really does show how far his character has come, and even seeing the Deluminator again. Dumbledore gives Ron the Deluminator in his will, and that brings you all the way back to the first scene in the series where you saw Albus use the Deluminator on all of the street lamps at Privet Drive. I also love the darker tone and atmosphere that this film has. It sets it apart from other Potter films in that regard because you don't even see Hogwarts once during it. You can only imagine the horrible things that are going on there. It's really an on-the-run story. Harry, Ron, and Hermione are now fugitives, running from the government, which has now become corrupted by evil. I love the Ministry of Magic scene where they break in using Polyjuice Potion, and you see all of these corrupt officials, especially Umbridge, who is now in a higher seat of power than before. It really does reinforce how everything in this world has become corrupted by evil, and it adds to the world building of the series. A scene that I'm particularly fond of is the Godric's Hollow scene, when Harry and Hermione go to visit Harry's parents' grave. Hermione magics a wreath onto their tombstone. It's just a very powerful scene. I also love the buildup of dread to the reveal that Nagini has been hiding inside of Bathilda Bagshot's skin. It's just a cool scene. I like how she starts talking to Harry in Parseltongue, but he almost doesn't pick up on that because he's become so accustomed to hearing Parseltongue that he doesn't realize he's being spoken to in a different language. I just feel like it's a really well-handled scene. And I also love the tale of the 3 brothers as Hermione reads them the story of the Deathly Hallows. It's this really cool and creative animated sequence, which is one of the most memorable scenes from the film. And of course, I had to talk about Dobby's death scene, which is extremely well handled. Although they did not properly build up the relationship between Harry and Dobby, which I will talk about later, it's still very well executed. Daniel Radcliffe's performance during it may be his best from the entire series. He really does express a wide variety of emotions during it, and it is crazy how a CG elf is able to pull such powerful emotions out of the audience. The score during it is fantastic. As Luna closes his eyes, you can hear a very subtle and quiet rendition of Hedwig's theme, or as many of you may refer to it as, the original Harry Potter theme, reinforcing how this character that many associate with the early days of the series has now died, sacrificing himself to save Harry. With all of that said, it's time to get into the bad aspects of this film, of which there are many. Now, this film is similar to Half-Blood Prince in the fact that the opening and ending of it are the best parts, but it has the opposite problem that I criticized Order of the Phoenix for having, in that adaptation lacked the exposition that was necessary to tell the story because Order of the Phoenix is a very expository book. I don't remember Deathly Hallows being a particularly expository book, but this film is essentially exposition dump after exposition dump, because the creative team realized that they cut out so much context that was necessary for the story from the past few films that they tried to make up for it in this one, and it doesn't work. From the very beginning of the film, there's a terrible exposition dump when the Order of the Phoenix arrives at Privet Drive, and Bill and Fleur and Ramus and Tonks are there, and they essentially just explain to the audience that each couple is now engaged, and that Bill got attacked by Fenrir Greyback, which they forgot to show at the end of Half-Blood Prince, so they rush it into this exposition dump. And then at the wedding at the Burrow, Harry talks to Elphius Doge, this guy who knew Dumbledore, and he essentially just explains Dumbledore's backstory and how he had a brother because they forgot to naturally implement that into the story, so they rush it into yet another expository scene. And Dobby randomly appears halfway through the movie for no apparent reason because the creative team realized that he was actually essential to the plot and that they had made a mistake cutting him out of the past few films. This made sense in the book because Dobby worked at the kitchens in Hogwarts, and Harry had tasked both him and Kreacher to spy on Draco for him, so they already knew each other. But in this film, Dobby just says that he saw Kreacher snooping around Diagon Alley and that he knew something was up. Why would Dobby even be in Diagon Alley? That's a very shady place to be. It's obvious that they just wrote in some lazy explanation as to how he's back in the story, and once he comes back, he's essentially just a plot device to get them out of Malfoy Manor, and then he immediately dies. So although his death scene is very well executed, and it moves me to tears every time, I would be lying if I didn't say that that was better executed in the book, because they had built up Harry and Dobby's relationship over the course of almost the entire series. And the most hilarious exposition dump of all is in a scene where Hermione's cutting Harry's hair and then suddenly realizes that the Sword of Gryffindor can destroy Horcruxes. I guess she just had an epiphany at this exact moment for no reason, and then decides to give us a bunch of exposition about the Sword of Gryffindor. The problem with this is that they do not prioritize the exposition that is necessary for the immediate story. For example, at the beginning of the film, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are attacked by some Death Eaters in a cafe. Harry asks how they knew they were going to be there, and the other two say they have no idea. But in a deleted scene from this film, Ron explains that saying Voldemort's name essentially acts as a beacon and that the Death Eaters are alerted to your presence. That's some pretty important information, but I guess it wasn't necessary. The scene that would actually explain some of this and make this make sense? Nah, we don't need that. We need the scene of Harry and Hermione dancing. There are also a ton of lapses in logic in this film that are made up for in the book, but that for some reason are in this movie. For example, after the Battle of the Seven Potters, Harry's like, I won't let anyone else die for me, and I'm a fugitive, I can't go to the wedding. But then Ron's like, yo bro, you should go to the wedding, and he's like, fine, I'll go to the wedding. And then he just goes to the wedding as himself, and then of course the Death Eaters show up and attack him there. In the book, he used Polyjuice Potion to disguise himself as someone else so he wouldn't be recognized. But in the movie, he just decides to go to the wedding as himself, full well knowing that he's a fugitive and that the Death Eaters will probably attack him there. Why? Because the creative team forgot about it, I guess. This film also completely disregards or cuts out characters' conclusions and or redemptions. The Dursleys had 2 scenes from this film which were completely cut out. In one of them, Harry talks to his Aunt Petunia, and she tells him that the night his mother died, he not only lost his mother, but she also lost her sister. In the second scene, Dudley tells Harry that he doesn't consider him to be a waste of space. These were very important scenes and drew the Dursleys' character arcs to a proper conclusion, but they decided to prioritize Harry and Hermione dancing and Ron talking about the little ball of light touching his heart. The new Minister for Magic, Rufus Scrimgeour, played by Bill Nye, shows up in one scene and has my favorite line of the series.
Ronald Bilious Weasley.
But then in the next scene, he's killed off screen. What was important about his character in the book is that we learn he wouldn't give up Harry, and that was the reason he was killed, reinforcing the idea that he was a better person than Cornelius Fudge, the former Minister for Magic. But that information is completely absent from the film. Likewise, Kreacher's redemption arc is completely absent. In the book, we learn about Regulus Black and how Kreacher was connected to him, that he really did care about Regulus. The reason he didn't like Sirius is because he showed him incredible disrespect. In the book, Harry, Ron, and Hermione learn this, and they begin to show him respect. He shows them respect in turn and begins baking them a pie. But in the movie, he's just like, filthy mudblood, you suck, and they completely cut out his entire character arc. But the biggest offender of all of the disregarded character arcs has to be Peter Pettigrew. The way that they execute his death scene, quote-unquote, is such a middle finger to fans of the book series. In the book, Harry and Ron are trying to escape from the dungeons in Malfoy Manor, and Wormtail tries to stop them, but Harry reminds him of how he spared his life in Prisoner of Azkaban. Wormtail hesitates, and is then killed by the hand that Voldemort gave him, which senses his betrayal. But in the end, Peter Pettigrew refused to kill the son of his childhood best friend. How do they execute this in the film, you may ask? Well, allow me to show you. The last thing I will say about this film is that it really does highlight what I hate about movie Ron, and that is that he is too mean and too dumb to the point where it becomes detrimental to the integrity of the character. A lot of films do this, where they start out with a funny character, and then they think the only way to make that character funny is by having them be overly dumb. But in the books, I don't remember Ron being an overly dumb character. He was funny because he was witty, not because he was dumb. He was dumb sometimes, but not to the level that he is in these movies. There are points in these films where he is so incredibly incompetent and buffoonish, and that has never been more clear than in the Deathly Hallows Part 1.
Midnight. Mum always said midnight. But Twilight's fine. Better, actually.
Entire scenes in this film come to a screeching halt because Ron has to make some stupid joke or say a dumb line that doesn't even make sense in the context of the film. For example, at the beginning of the film, when Rufus Scrimgeour presents to each of the trio the items that Dumbledore gave them in his will, Ron is acting like Harry and Hermione should know what the book Tales of Beedle the Bard is, despite the fact that he's fully aware of the fact that they were not raised in a magical family. But I guess they just had to have some dumb joke and make Ron look like a freaking idiot. He's also way too mean, and I mentioned this in some of my earlier videos, but in this film, he's so mean to the point where he becomes an unlikable character. He was mean at some points in earlier movies, but there was usually a reason for it, and it could be excused. But in this film, he's mean to a point where it's not excusable anymore. He straight up tells Harry,
"You have no family,"
which is something he would never have said in the books, and which he didn't say in the Deathly Hallows book, from what I remember. They changed this line, and although that may seem like a minimal change to some, it completely changes the context of this argument to me, because Ron is implying that he doesn't view Harry as if he is part of his own family, which he very obviously does in the books, but I don't know if he does in the movies because they've given him so few scenes of legitimate compassion. Throughout this entire film, he's just glaring angrily at everyone. And they give him a mini arc in this film where he has to get over his jealousy toward Harry and Hermione for some reason, and that culminates in him destroying the Horcrux. But the reason they give him for being mad makes literally no sense. They just have this scene where Hermione gives Harry some water and that pisses Ron off. If they had shown him watching them dance together or something that could be perceived as romantic, then that would give him somewhat of a reason to be mad. But as is, they don't give him any legitimate reason to be mad outside of the fact that he wore the Horcrux for a day, but they explicitly state that he's been wearing it for a day and that he's been mad outside of the times when he's been wearing the Horcrux. As a result of all this, the entire arc they try to give him falls completely flat. That's about all I have to say about Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. Now, I've felt like I've had to say this at the end of every Harry Potter review since Goblet of Fire, and that is that I don't hate this film. All of the Harry Potter films hold a special place in my heart since I grew up with them, but I must admit that I never realized how many problems this film actually has. As I said in the video, most of it feels like it consists of lazy exposition intended to explain things that they forgot to naturally implement into the story. All the while, they neglect most of the essential character arcs and plot beats. At the end of the day, this may be my least favorite Harry Potter film. For the longest time, I thought Goblet of Fire was my least favorite, but that film does contain some very important events that affect the rest of the series going forward. But this film feels very uneventful for the most part until the end. I'm still looking forward to watching Deathly Hallows Part 2, though, because I do think it is a solid conclusion to the series, while suffering from some of the issues that this film suffers from. But you guys let me know. What are your thoughts on Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Just whatever your thoughts are, please let me know them all in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.